Hey everybody, I'm going to go over these plugins we've been playing with in the Zooms, but I'm doing this one in ScreenFlow, and I'm going to go over the basic After Effects plugin that we looked at called Radio Wave, and then we'll go over some of the Red Giant examples to make our just ideas for making our seamless backgrounds. So I have my Illustrator logo with most of the layers hidden already imported into After Effects. I'm going to go make a brand new solid so we can apply our effect to it. I'm going to go back up to effects now, and I'm going to choose generate. This is basically the Adobe built-in generators, and I'm going to go to radio waves. This one's really fun. Right now it's on top of my logo, so I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to put the logo layer on top, and then we'll continue. So this one's generating radio waves out from a center point. This could be, thought of as a radio tower, and if you could see the radio waves, what would be emitting, and it could be, you imagining if you threw a pebble into a pond and these are the waves coming out if you were looking from above. So that's the metaphor. The frequency is actually how many of these, how many cycles of wave there are per second. So at 1 per second, you've got a frequency of 1. If we increase that, we're going to get more lines per second. So let's do that. Okay, so that's frequency. Expansion scales the size on our 2D screen of how far out these waves are going to travel. Okay, so that's the expansion parameter, and we can play with that. And it's one of the ways we're going to scale this effect. Frequency is going to determine how many lines are within that area. Okay, and expansion is sort of the outer diameter. But as you play with those, they might affect each other. Another thing that's going to affect it is the lifespan. So you're noticing we have an 8-second composition here that's going to loop. So having a 10-second lifespan, these aren't even finished evolving before the composition cuts off. So we probably want to make this less than the 8 seconds. Let's go to 4 and see what happens. So now they're only growing, they're growing 1.5 times a second, but they're only growing for 4 seconds. Let's put this to 2. So now there's 2 per second, and let's put this to 8. So now they're going to grow out the entire duration of our loop, but as their life ends, they fade out. So that's kind of neat. We've got this sort of a vignette feel. But this doesn't make for a great loop either, because it's going to pulse on and off. Maybe with mine it can, because it's called pulse wave. But for anything else, it would probably be a bad idea. You could render this out and then reverse it and have it breathe in and out. Or another thing we could do is we can make our composition a lot longer and just let it build up to this point at the 8-second point where it gets to the expansion, and then it just keeps generating. And then we could take an 8-second fully generated, fully expanded version from the second half of our 16-second animation. The first 8 we would be building up like we're seeing right now. The second 8 seconds it would be built and just looping. So to get this one to loop, you're probably going to have to double the length of your composition, render it out, and then chop off the first half. So there are some really cool parameters with this. If I wanted to fit it into my world of my logo, I might go over to Illustrator, and a quick trick is I'm going to show some more of my layers and save that. Let me take my opacity back up to 100% and save it. And so now I've got my pinks, purples, oranges, greens available, and we'll come back to After Effects and we'll see the update. So now when I go to my color for my waveform, first of all, the centers of the logo are opaque, and my expansion size isn't getting out past that. So it's happening, but we're not seeing it. So let's expand it a little bit more So it comes outside. Now we're not going to see it until it builds out past the opaque logo. But that's kind of a cool thing too, and we could loop something like that. So playing around with between your files, between After Effects parameters and Illustrator parameters, can cause some neat effects. Let's stop the animation so we can eyedrop the orange, and now our waveform will render orange. Might work. The purple might work. Should be coming out right about now. It's not coming out. Oh, that's because I sampled it as black. It was animating, we just weren't seeing it. So there's that look. There could be this look. I might take that color and increase its brightness. So now it's related to that color, but I made it brighter. So we could do something like that. That's a nice feel. So once again, playing with your color palette, your Illustrator assets, and your After Effects plugin is always a roundabout way. That's why I keep them both open. So now I'm going to play with the last thing I did was to select this layer and change its opacity down to maybe 60. So now I'm changing the opacity of just the black circle with the orange stroke. And I'll save that, come back to After Effects, see what we got. So now we're seeing the waveform build inside, and then it gets brighter as it gets past the eclipse point of the outer stroke of the circle of the logo. So there's all sorts of things you can do playing with these guys to give it a nice graphic look. I stumbled onto a few more things, so to show those off a little bit better, back to Illustrator, and it's best to turn these guys off and just keep our text part of our logo showing. Get rid of the other nonsense. All right, so this looks cool, but as we play with lifespan, maybe shorten it a bit, we can actually see like the vignetting effect happening. Now, what I haven't played with yet are the start width and end width of the stroke of the circle. So at the beginning of the lifespan, I can have the stroke width be 0.1. That would be, well, it doesn't go that small. It only goes down to 1. But what's my maximum? So I can make the outer strokes pretty big. And so now this thing's going to scale as it grows. Let's come back and see that happen. So that's kind of fun. Definitely a different look. I like it. It's taking a little time to render, but once we get through this first cycle, it should be pretty cool. Now, I thought that was cool. I'm going to take the producer point, which is the center point of the generator, and I'm going to put it maybe in the center of the U. I think would be cool. So that's also cool. And then we can turn on reflection. So when the lifespan, when the expansion reaches the edge of the screen, if you have reflection on, it'll bounce off the edges and it creates more geometry. And I can play with this so it comes back and frames the word by maybe increasing the lifespan a little, letting them grow a little longer, getting closer, but then fading out before they actually re-hit the typography. So I just change that lifespan a little bit. But it's still keeping that text, the priority. So this is pretty sweet. I really like this plugin a lot, this effect. Now, if that's not cool enough, let's get rid of the reflections. It's good to simplify. I'm also going to bring the stroke width down a little bit, even though I like it really thick like that. Let's bring it down to about 40. Why I needed to go to a rounded number, I don't know. But I stumbled on velocity. I was thinking that would have to do with the speed, but velocity and direction of a waveform are going to alter more geometry, and we can start to get a 3D look, which I really like. So I've got direction set to 90. It might have been there by default, but I think I just put it there. But as I play with velocity, it's now changing position of where each recursion of the pulse goes. And I think something like this could look sweet, coming right to the edge there. So that's kind of neat. Maybe a little bit more, maybe change the angle too, but maybe not as much. So this started to look to me like a cone, especially when I changed these sizes, maybe thicker. Maybe bring the expansion in a bit. Yes. So once again, just start playing with the parameters. I like this really thin one. That was kind of cool. Let's change the center back over to here. And expansion a little bigger, lifespan a little bigger. So once again, we can play quite a bit with this. Too much? Really jumps on you. Okay. I like this set. Let's try 8. Yeah. So, I mean, I can do infinite fun, sort of pseudo 3D kind of feel with it. What would happen if I crank this up to 12 and put the reflections on and increase the expansion? It's going to bounce off edges. So, yeah, you can get nuts. So, very fun plugin. So, I'm going to leave this one at that point and let you go explore with it as you would. So that is radio waves. Let's hide that. Close this up. Let's go and add a new solid. Again, change the color slightly so you can tell the difference. So now I've got this one. And we're going to move into our Red Giant universe generators and our good friend Fractal background, which is what we've looked at in the zooms. This is always the first one I go to with the Red Giant generators because it naturally loops for us. Our composition length is 8 seconds. Halfway through that is 4 seconds. The beginning's at 0. But our loop duration to the plugin is at 5. So let's put that to 8. And now let's just run it. And it should have to hit enter. And now let's play it. So now this generator is going to make this what looked like a spray paint pattern now animates, and now it's just this anomalous generator that's going through these 3 colors: a black, a light color, and a blue. If I open the color map, I can see the colors. Once again, if I had my logo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my Illustrator layer again for a moment so I can see these colors. I'm going to bring its opacity back up. I'm going to turn on these guys and these guys. Save it and go back. Okay, reason I brought the colors back up is now I can come into here and pick my eyedrop my green. Okay, and now my generator's colors are matching, and maybe this guy is going to get based on cancel. Couldn't I just hit this? Yes, and I can click on here and get that color. But maybe it's, I wanted that to be a brighter color, so what I do now is that I dropped it off of here. I'm going to select it here and raise its brightness value up. And now maybe it'll show up a little bit differently inside the animation. I'm seeing a purplish color come. Yeah. So now I'm seeing my logo colors right in the plugin. And now I'm going to go back to Illustrator and hide those layers. There's other ways I could do this. I could bring in a palette. I can render a palette out as a PNG or JPEG and just bring that into After Effects and eyedrop on that asset. Throw it on the comp and eyedrop there. But there's 100 ways to do it. So let us go back to After Effects. Oop, here, got to save, then go back to After Effects. So now we have our logo colors in our texture. That's nice as well. So with this, we've got the loop duration set. Scale is the size of the actual generator. So you can make it, scaling it up is going to make more instances of it. So it's kind of like we're zooming away from like a art board. So I'm going to zoom in to make it a little bit bigger. I want to have some colors. This could almost turn into like a wiping sort of color transition. Here's more of a globular at 17. Let's see, around here, the shapes are, now I'm thinking about the relationship of these pink globs as they come up in their relationship to the size of the word and the logo itself. Are they becoming too big? Is too many of them too small, distracting? I'm going to play with that when I scale it. I think that's a bit too busy. So I'm going to crank it back down into maybe the 30s. All right. So I think that's kind of got a nice balance. I can probably get more pink than green by playing with the blur. That's just blurring the whole thing overall. So there's different ways where I can change these values, mostly with the amount of brightness in the color itself. The brighter you make them, the more they're going to last. It's a top to bottom relationship, so this one's going to dominate over the second one, over the third one. It's not until I made the third one really bright that it would show up. If I kept that brightness value back down, the amount of that and the size of those are going to actually change. Like, it's now not even strong enough to break out of the green as much. That might be nice. Give it a little bit more brightness. Okay, that's kind of cool. All right, so you play until you're happy. The scale we looked at, I'm going to skip angle, brightness, and contrast. Angle we'll play with, but it's just going to change the angle of the math that is drawing it. So if you were to keyframe this, you would see some kind of movement, but I'm going to leave that at 0 for now. That one's not as interesting to us. Now, if I wanted to make this have some movement, right now it's just growing globs. I might want to make a waterfall. I might want to make just a streak of motion that's going side to side. So I'll do the streak of motion first. So there is a scroll X and a scroll Y, and these are going to animate movement one way or the other. So if I undo this and do scroll X, I'm going to get a sideways motion. Feels like pulse wave is moving to the left. If I do a negative number, it feels like, it's moving to the right. The logo's moving to the right, or it's still and we're panning right. So there's those sorts of things. Let's step back to 0. So if you want to add movement, you've got scroll X and scroll Y. We also have blurs. So, well, let's add that. So let's do a horizontal blur while we're doing a horizontal scroll X. That's kind of nice. So if you want to make that abstract more abstract, let's bring the blur value up, So now we're getting those colors and they're moving, but the globiness isn't as much, how the globs are growing and distorting isn't as much of a factor as the sideways movement. And once again, the speed of the sideways movement. You can add speed and add energy. You may want to increase the blur to almost streaking levels. Let's see how fast that scroll can go, only to 100. So that's about as fast as you're going to scroll it. Something slower might be nice. A lot of blur with just slow motion. It's kind of a cool feel. So that's more of an abstract, color feel that does loop properly, So that's kind of nice. I mentioned a waterfall. So to do that, I'm going to scroll the opposite way. I'm going to zero this one out. Zero my blur. I'm going to change my colors to my basic waterfall colors. So I'll make this a blue. I'll make this a much brighter blue, turquoisey blue. And I'll make this really whitish. Let's just go to white, total bright, because foam, foam in the water. So let's see. This is a nice blue, but in a waterfall it may not look realistic. And the waterfall's aerated, so the water's going to be lighter colors. So maybe these two blues will give us the contrast we need. All right, so that's cool. I may need more pieces in the waterfall, so maybe I'm going to scale it up to have more parts. Okay, so that doesn't look like a waterfall, does it? But let's add that scroll Y and get it pouring down at full speed, and then let's do that vertical blur. So now we've got sort of a downward falling piece. Let's play with the speed again. Now that we got the blur streaked out so long, we can maybe slow down the feel. And so the speed of water falling and all that is going to be different. Once again, got to go back to the scale. Let's crank this up. If we want more streaks, we bring this higher. May look good lower down in here. So depends. It's a very abstract idea. Just add the sound of water to this, and you'll get that vibe. Maybe not so much blur either. So when the texture reappears outside of the blur, maybe the speed needs to increase. Maybe the scale needs to increase. So let's do both. So it's up to you, what you feel works. But I'm just going for an abstract waterfall. If I was to take this and then maybe I had a footage of a waterfall, tight zoomed in footage, but I didn't love the color of it, I'd use this plugin to add moving color to fit my palette for my logo and for my brand to colorize that video. So this plugin would be perfect for that. So really nice plugin. I didn't get into changing the different shapes we can get, so let me get rid of the movement on the scrolls and get back to these shapes. So you can go through the, we were using billowed before. Looks like spray paint. Ridged is just got a sharper point to it. Ridged might work better for our waterfall. So let's try it one more time. Yeah, see, just the ridged, changing the algorithm from, we were using billowed before, ridged might be better for a waterfall feel, or purlin, or let's see. So I think I like ridged so far. Cellular, we could play with the size and different stuff, but just these are different math equations that are going to draw different geometries. Let's go look at the base geometries of these. Here's the IQ moving. Here's warp moving, going back up. Warp is really cool. Now that looks like water, and this would be a cool thing to use for some kind of time-space continuum sort of a feel. Where's my scale angle? So now angle, I can control where the weird part is. I was thinking of moving the weird part sort of to where my beginning of my word is, like that. So that's a minus 20. See, when it was at 0, that bright part was a little bit below the PU, which works, but I'm picky, so I wanted to take it maybe to here. 20 was what I hit before, and I liked it. Oh, that's plus 20. I had minus 20. So that's kind of cool. You could rotate that, move it, zoom it while it's animating, keyframe these things, um, keyframe the scale. Be really cool. Yeah, so right off the bat, the first red giant generator is incredibly diverse, incredibly useful, especially if you play with it. I would say with each one of these, spend a 5 to 20 minute window playing. Uh, Minimum 5, maximum 20. Bail out. There's a thing in Fractals called a bailout value. Get out after 20 minutes so you can try another plugin.